He loves Cars and Moana.
Moana's
which is
good.
Also pretty good. Yeah,
Moana's good.
I get kind of sick of hearing The Rock and whatever. It is what it is. I can suck it up.
I'd say he's pretty well fit for that role.
Yeah, he's good. He's really good at it for sure. Everybody, welcome to Pursuing Pixels. My name is Kevin Portelli, and I'm here tonight with Randall Nolery.
Hey, folks.
And it's just the two of us. We're knocking out a not back-to-back episodes, but 2 weeks in a row. John had a busy night tonight, so wasn't able to join us. But Randall and I were like, hey, we've had a few video games under our belts over the last few weeks. I've actually been doing a little more gaming than usual, although still kind of scraping the surface. I don't know about you on your end, Randall, but... Yeah,
no, it's true. It's more scraping the surface, but there's still enough of these ones that have kind of been floating about that I just want to get on the record too, regardless,
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at a lot of the time too. Although I will say the one game I'm still kind of slowly chipping away at is Gunbrella. I might come back to that one eventually, but I haven't played since we talked about it last on the podcast. But that's the one game I've done kind of 3 longer sessions with. But lately I've just been doing just 1 or 2 solid sessions with the game, and then just moving on to checking out the next thing or whatever. Just something else grabs my attention. But
especially with Game Pass and everything else going on, it's totally understandable to just flip around a little bit like that.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, speaking of, actually, we were syncing up with the Boss Fight guys, the band that John and I play in. We just got back from being in town, and we've been playing Overwatch. Overwatch 2, that is, to kind of gear up for the show that we just played last month. Or I guess this month still, but last month by the time this comes out. But then we, sunk up with a couple times too with our buddy DJ from the early days of the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And actually from our very first band's album, we got his face on the cover. The album's called Deej.
Yeah.
So nonetheless, we were, talking once we got back, I was like, should we ask Deej to be the 5th in our Overwatch circle, because we were kind of using it to gear up for the show and coordinate, even though a lot of times I was like, guys, we gotta talk about what songs we're gonna play instead of just planning our Overwatch rounds.
I don't know how y'all could do any planning or legitimate talking on something so hectic as Overwatch in the first place, for what that's worth.
We really didn't. For the most part, we just took a break at one point and said, what songs do we want to play? Okay, wrote them down on a piece of paper and then played Overwatch the whole rest of the time.
That's so funny.
Which
Deej is a hell of a video gamer, so
that's why I wanted to add him, because our buddy Mikey pretty much carries our team. Every play of the game is Mikey every time, and we were like, okay, maybe we can add DJ into the mix and even out our team. But then again, it might have tipped our matchmaking a little bit, because we still got mopped pretty good. It was a good 50-50. We were crushing some teams and then getting crushed pretty equally.
Sure.
But needless to say, or a roundabout way to say, since you mentioned Game Pass too, I had fired up the Xbox to get the Overwatch 2 up and running, because that's usually just what I play that on, since it's such a huge game file and everything. Although the other guys were saying it runs great on Switch, for whatever that's worth.
Wow.
John and Glenn both play it on Switch, and they said they had no problems with it whatsoever.
Dang.
And obviously, John, I was assuming he was playing it on his Steam Deck, just because that's what he's got now, and he was like, nope, I just like playing it on my Switch, and it's already there, and it runs great. So
that's impressive that it can actually run that well, that he would stick with that despite having the Steam Deck. Wow.
Yeah, especially, Glenn doesn't have another option to use it. He's gonna have to sit at his laptop or something, where John has a easy hookup, perfect way to play the game. So
and the Steam Deck definitely has more oomph than a Switch does at this point.
Yeah.
Wow.
But again, roundabout way of saying that while I was on my Xbox, I checked out Game Pass, and I was absolutely thrilled to see that there was this game called Hauntii available day one on Game Pass, because number one, I just realized that the game had came out just because I was looking at the Switch eShop and saw that it had launched. And this was a game that I had been following for quite some time. I remember seeing it on social media, and they actually ran a Kickstarter campaign for the game that failed. Which was shocking to me. I remember our buddy Paradigm, who I've mentioned on the podcast numerous times, probably haven't brought him up in quite a while, but he was the person maybe who put this game on my radar, or at least I know that we had exchanged on comments and stuff oh, this looks amazing. And we even did a couple of those co-op streams that we did together where we would check out demos for games. And I think that was one of the games he spotlighted. He was it was on having its Kickstarter run.
Nice.
And I remember he was just man, he was really disappointed. I can't believe this game didn't hit its goal. And I thought the same, like we were both talking about, like, how does a game that looks this cool and like the demo played great, like there was just everything about the game. There's nothing negative to say about the production value is amazing, music's amazing, really clever gameplay ideas. And it was just like, how does a game like where like another game will, you know, crush its goal by 2,000%, and you know, I might be exaggerating a little, but you're just like, I just don't get.
Not sometimes, no.
Yeah, exactly. I just like, I don't get what will, you know, cause that to happen in some cases, and
it's got to just be so hard to cut through the noise on Kickstarter with something like that, especially when it's not, you know, for me, a lot of times what cuts through the noise is we're making a retro, you know, homebrew thing, and it's on this cartridge or for Dreamcast or whatever, and they're like, yeah, that looks cool. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna buy it because it's that way. But if it was just for Switch or just for a modern, I was like, yeah, it'll probably come out digitally. Do I really need to back it now? It looks cool, but probably not. You know, so, and then that's only if I see it in the first place, and there's a million other things competing for your attention, let alone projects on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or, you know, some of these other sites. You know, it's got to be tough, especially in the modern context.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. That's a great point, actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, that nonetheless, I was like really bummed to see that it didn't hit its goals, but then like right away after that, they seemed like they, you know, didn't lose any steam. Like, we're still working on the game. Like, don't fear and whatever. So, you know, however it ended up working out, it looked like they got published. I can't remember the name of the publisher now off the top of my head, but they hadn't published too many games. But again, to get that like Game Pass day one, I don't know if they got some funding from Microsoft. I don't know how all that stuff works on the back end, but nonetheless, whatever it took to get this game across the finish line, I am so glad it happened. Because again, I've only had one good session with it last night, or maybe it was 2 nights ago. But I played maybe the first 45 minutes or an hour, and I am absolutely loving this game. I don't know. I haven't been like this, like enthralled by like the visuals and like soundtrack of a game in so long. Like, again, like I've talked about so many times too, about like, can't wait till I move into my apartment and like have my own space where I can turn out all the lights and sit on the couch. And this was like not quite the game I was picturing, because I know I kept talking about like, I want to get sucked into like a Zelda or like a big adventure
AAA
kind of game.
Yeah.
And this is more like, so this is game, like, again, I haven't really talked about the game at all yet. It's like a top down, as far as like the gameplay goes, it's essentially like a top down twin stick shooter, but like not so much, like it very much looks, I haven't gotten any crazy shoot 'em up sections yet, but in the trailer it definitely looks like it gets a little bit bullet helly at times, but then it's also very much like puzzly and dungeon crawlery and like a Zelda top down kind of way. And there's all these like winding paths, and you're like, it's kind of like a black and white for the most part game, or like kind of like, it's not necessarily black and white, but like a black and like brownish, you know, off white kind of color. But anyways, it's like all like hand drawn.
Yes.
Best I can tell. And everything's 2D, but there's definitely this like 3D perspective going on with stuff. And like they shift the perspective a lot with like the visuals. Like, again, in the trailer, there was like this crazy like roller coaster thing where it like looked like you were like riding like off into the sunset. Like it looked insane. And like the map, I'm still like kind of getting used to how the map works, but like it's really cool. But like, again, like in a true like kind of top down twin stick bullet hell shooter, you got like your dash and whatnot. But like, again, you're going down these winding paths, and if you veer off the path, you start getting like swallowed up by the darkness, and you got to get back to and like the screen and visuals start warping and getting all crazy, and these creepy like red and pink eyes start, you know, popping up in the darkness, and then you just get kind of consumed by it, and you lose one of your hearts, and just like respawns you in a safe zone. I don't know if it's a checkpoint. I think maybe it is at a checkpoint, because there are actually like these crystal totem checkpoint things. But
nice.
The other kind of main mechanic of the game, kind of like Super Mario Odyssey style, you can like anything that you can shoot that isn't an enemy, or even that is an enemy for in some cases, you can like shoot them, and then if you hit them enough, there's like this like kind of yellow spiral meter thing that fills up above the character or whatever it is that you're shooting, and then you will like possess that character, because you're playing as a ghost, hence the name Hauntii. You're playing as this like ghost character, and then you'll like, you know, spawn into this like kind of flower giant creature that can like shoot stuff out of its mouth, or you can spawn into a tree and knock it down, or maybe I can't remember if you can knock it down or just kind of like shake it and wiggle stuff out of the tree. Nice. Or turn into a ladybug and then climb up the tree to get some collectibles, or Again, some of this stuff I didn't see myself, but you can like in the trailer that it looked like there was like this wrecking ball and you're like swinging and knocking stuff down. And
I did watch that trailer too. And
that trailer, I'll just say like if you have any like if you watch that trailer and you think it looks cool at all, like just get this game. Like it is, or if you have Game Pass, just check it out on Game Pass.
I've got no excuse. I mean, I got Game Pass. I already downloaded it because I watched the trailer and I saw that you got an achievement in it, and then I pulled up the trailer for it and I'm like, oh, this game visually, like Kevin said, it's, you're only working with, a few different colors, but they just maximize the visual impact of that. And it looks so cool. And it's so like hand drawn and just alive in its own style.
And like fluid and like,
yes.
Yeah. It's just so cool. And it's got a great sense of humor. Like there's not a ton of dialogue, which of course I love, but like, there's like some good flavor dialogue with some extra characters. There's a couple like kind of main characters that kind of put you along your different quest paths. But I'm just like so like I think I said in our Discord when I messaged you guys and said that I was playing this, like I was like I haven't been like this sucked into the visuals of a game since playing Grease. I'm not sure how you say the name of that game. I forget. But that was another game where it's all like kind of hand painted watercolor. Yeah. And this game, like, just starts out and again, you play as this ghost and like you kind of meet this like friend, like they seem like there's some kind of angel character. And like right at the beginning, you start, or early on in the game, you start like bursting up with them, like blasting off into the sky. And you're like, again, the perspective changes to like this side on, like this game just seems like it's going to be nuts.
Nice.
In the best way. And like just throw in new things that you left and right. But like you're just like flying and you have control, you're like steering left and right, but it didn't seem like if I didn't hit, like there were like these little leaves I could touch that would like launch me up a little faster, but it seemed like if I didn't touch those, like I would have eventually just made it to the top, no problem. But then eventually like that angel character or whatever keeps going up, but then you get like shackled down by your chains and like pulled back down to the surface. And then it's all about like from that point on, just like you're trying to find your friend again. And then like a lot of times the dialogue kind of wordless or not wordless. I don't know. Just something about
wordless is fine.
Maybe it's just because the presentation's so minimalist because there are words. So it's like, it's not that it's wordless, but there's definitely like, it's just so expressive and whatnot that it like, it almost feels like you're like reading the words, but you don't even need to. Cause like the characters are like emoting so much. Like it almost has like a little bit even like of, like that that 2D 3D is like almost like a Paper Mario kind of like perspective a little bit. How there's that like layeredness to the like it's a top down game or side on game, but it's like 3D kinda. I don't know. Right. It's just I don't know.
Even some of the perspective can come off almost a bit isometric that way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It definitely feels like kind of like an isometric more. When I say top down, it is that kind of angled perspective for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just absolutely in love, especially with like overall the presentation. Oh, and the music, like right off the bat, the title screen, I was just like, whoa. Like this is like there's so many movements just in this title screen music. Like usually there's like, there's like a one loop and then there's like maybe one extra layer and then it just loops again. Especially in a lot of like the little indie games I play. And that's not to slight them or anything, but it's just like we're not going to put a bunch of time into this opening title track.
This is title screen that you're going to press A on in like 3 seconds.
5 seconds. Yeah, exactly. It's like this is like they clearly like I'm sure you can get a soundtrack for this game or download it at least because it is very well done. I don't know. I don't even know what to say about like it's just very moody and not I was gonna say atmospheric, but it's got like definitely a lot of melody to it as well. So it's not just atmosphere.
Right.
But just I can't say enough good things about this one, and one that I'm very much like I think I said to you before we started recording here, like I was planning, I didn't end up having enough time before we sat down to record, but when I got home from work I was at work today, I was like, when I get home, if I have time before we record, I'm definitely going to play some more Hauntii.
Nice.
I didn't get around to it, like I said, but I'm really looking forward to playing more of this game. And again, so glad it came to Game Pass, but one that I'll even like if they end up releasing a physical copy, like it seems that legitimately awesome, best I can tell so far. So
that's high praise.
Yeah.
It looks so cool. I'm going
polished.
To pop it at some point. I'm actually going to launch it on my Xbox. I don't have an excuse. It looks too cool.
And I'll say it, I've played games that have it that are, on this level of like presentation. Again, not this level of presentation because this is a very unique thing, but I've played games that seem like they shouldn't be putting the Xbox through the paces any more than this that have not run that great, and this game ran perfectly the whole time, best I could tell. So
nice.
Not to jinx it, but
yeah. And
but I've played other stuff like Chicory
Xbox One, so that's super cool that they probably optimized it for that experience as well.
For sure, yeah, because I've played stuff like Chicory or Toem that is like, it's just like definitely ran a little bit more stuttery, where it's like, it seems like this game shouldn't really be, putting my console through the paces, but
right.
Yeah, nonetheless, I can't recommend this one enough. Obviously, check it out for sure if you got Game Pass. It is like one of those indie games. It's like $20, I think, full price, but it's one that I think is, from what I've played so far, would be worth it if you scooped it up. But yeah, I'm definitely loving it so far.
Awesome.
But yeah, why don't I kick it over to you? We'll go back and forth tonight with some of the stuff we've been playing. Yeah,
another new release here, because that's what we do. We talk about new releases on the Pursuing Pixels podcast
every now and
then. No Neo Geo Pocket Color coverage during the main cast today. Princess Peach Showtime is what I'm going to talk about. Switch release developed by Goodfeel, our friends at Goodfeel.
Yes.
Just came out this year in 2024. And it's super cool. It's one that, I and my family have been anticipating. I try to, still kind of keep a side eye to the Nintendo Directs. I can't say I watched them as much as I did, during the, Iwata days necessarily, but I still try to catch what I can, and saw that on one of those, like, oh, that's awesome. Like, Peach is getting her own game again. Like, it's literally has not, like, they've done more representation with their female characters Nintendo has, in the last decade, with them being playable, especially in the what was it? Mario 3D World and stuff like that. You could play, Cat Peach and stuff like that. Like, Daisy's come up more. There's been in Rosalina and some of, like, obviously the sports games and stuff like that.
Pauline, even,
you're not seeing as much representation directly for Peach in her own game. There was that, Super Princess Peach on DS, which is, looking back, there's some tough elements there that have not aged all that well. So it's nice to see a new thing come out that has the female protagonist on a Nintendo game, first party game.
And just letting Peach be like a badass.
Yes. Not just being saved. Not just being captured and saved, but actually doing things.
Well, and like you mentioned in Super Princess Peach, like all like the emotion, like that was a kind of a cool game, a cute game, but like it's like, okay,
beautiful
like
visuals.
Let's just like Peach can't keep her emotions in check, and like those are all your power ups. Like, okay, like it's like kind of a cute idea, but like I don't know,
a little rough there in retrospect.
On paper, better on paper than in execution.
Although I'm glad I grabbed that used when I did, because I went to a retro game store and they were selling it for like $100.
Oh my goodness! I've got a copy of that one too, and it's really great. It's one of the games, like, the art really reminds me of Super Mario World, like the brightness. And,
yes.
So I do like it, but it does, and it's not the best game by any means, but
no, but it's a unique DS game, right?
Yeah,
and at least
solid
did have
2D
a
platformer,
female protagonist. And I want my daughter to see, like, oh yeah, it's not just, it's not all just the same male characters that you get to play as or whatever. Like, obviously a lot of games have gotten good at this sort of thing over time, of letting you, if it's a generic protagonist, they'll let you choose a gender or anything else, and way more than they ever used to, right?
Yeah.
Elder Scrolls and things like that. There's tons of games that do that, but that's a big digression. So Princess Peach Showtime is all based around Peach, and so far it's the Showtime is basically you're kind of part of, you're on a stage or whatever, and you're part of a set of plays essentially, and it basically is a conceit to allow Peach to have a bunch of different powers, a bunch of different opportunities to be like sword fighter Peach, or ninja Peach, or cowgirl Peach, or patissier Peach, who does bakery things. And it's a fun game that's, so far at least, it hasn't taken itself too seriously, but it also hasn't been so routine. I would say like each one of those feels pretty unique to control. Like there's different abilities amongst just those characters that I've unlocked so far, and it seems like there's more. I basically
it looked like there was like 10 or 12 like in like the trailer or whatever. I remember watching something. I was like, there's over 10. I remember counting them,
which is pretty great. It's like I think I've only gotten these like 4 or 5. I want to say so far. Granted, we just did a couple of sessions so far. Maybe I'm like an hour and a half in, something like that. But typically so far it's been, here's the level that's designed around Sword Fighter Peach. And, then it's a lot of, attacks with your, like fencing sword essentially, and dodging, maybe like the enemy damage circles that might be coming across the floor, like jumping over that. And it might go into like a slow-mo mode if you time it correctly. And then you have an opportunity to do your counter attack, or things like that. Ninja Peach was more kind of like think like Metal Gear, kind of sneaking around, not being in the spotlight, and or some of the like think Ocarina of Time, when you're sneaking around the outside of the castle sort of sections, that sort of stuff. There's even like Detective Peach, which I think was in the trailers and a lot of what they showed in the direct, which is very almost like point and click adventure, I would guess. But you're moving Peach around and kind of inspecting things, and
it gave me like Luigi's Mansion vibes. During that part in the trailer, which kind of feels like a point and click adventure game a little bit.
Yes, great comparison there to Luigi's Mansion, and this looks a little askew. Oh, there's something behind that painting or whatever. Like there's a lot of that sort of stuff going on, and although in this one more than Luigi's Mansion, there's also talking to the characters that happen to be there when there was something stolen from the museum, and like you had to talk to them, and the lights went out, but why is that character wearing glasses when he wasn't before, and this and that, and like it's just kind of figuring that stuff out. So they've done a good job of kind of varying the gameplay, using that as an excuse, right? It's not just you put a different suit on and you're still doing the same punch attacks or whatever for every character, right? Which is cool. It's been good that way, and it's definitely Fiona watched me play it. I let her. I was like, you want to play it? She's like, yeah, I'll do a little bit of it, but she mostly wanted me to do it and to kind of control it, so it was more like a movie experience for her. Granted, she's still young, so she's just now getting into some of that control for herself in games and figuring all that out. Let alone the reading of everything. And there's a decent amount of dialogue here, but it's all pretty well written and clever, not too far away from like a Paper Mario or Luigi's Mansion vibe that way too, I would say.
I played the demo and it felt pretty well paced out, which sometimes when you like play a demo especially for like a AAA Nintendo game or something like that, if they're really just giving you the opening bits of the game, it can feel a little bit like, come just get to the game. Come on, I just want to check this out for a second. To see if I want it. And I do remember that's because I talked about this on a Save It for the Cast, and I might have even talked about it briefly with you guys. The demo, and I kind of landed on like, I think I even stopped playing it. I only checked out, I saw a little bit of the Sword Fighter and a little bit of the Patisserie Peach, which I actually don't even remember how those levels played out. I remember doing like the cake designs that kind of felt like a Mario Party mini game. Like
the cake like one was very, very Mario Party mini game, I would say. Which was fun.
Chiseling out cool. The stone, kind of puzzle. But I thought they like the Sword Fighter combat, and I remember when they first like announced the game, thinking like, I almost wish like they could have made a whole game with these mechanics. But I'm sure there'll be multiple mechanics that I'll feel that way about in the game throughout it. Like, this one's great, could have built a whole game, and I'm sure there's others where you're like, not. Like, that's sort of how I felt about the Patisserie one, the little bit of it I played. Like, okay, this feels a little less engaging than the sword fighting mechanics.
Sure.
But I'm sure, when any game that's throwing a bunch of mechanics at you, you're going to have your favorites and your, lesser ones.
Absolutely. Although I never minded, like, in that Mario Party example, I always was kind of a sucker for the ones where it's like, make the picture look like the picture in the middle, like, sort of things. And I'm like, oh, okay. And that's kind of what you're getting here with the, the Patisserie Patissier Peach was like, make it look like this cake, and the designs get more and more intricate, and do it in this time frame, and it gets kind of I Love Lucy hectic that way a little bit too. But just kind of a nice little change of pace, and the whole kind of stage play aspect of it, given that Paper Mario Thousand Year Door feel a little bit that way too, which of course I'm a sucker for. And of course
you get a little bit of that flavor from it for sure. And it is from, you said Good Feel. That's they're the like Yoshi's Crafted World, Kirby's Epic Yarn and stuff. They've got a great track record, so that definitely has this game. I think what I said to you guys was like, it'll definitely be a game that I'll probably snag when it goes a little cheaper than full price at some point.
Yeah, and like the visuals, like a lot of the Good Feel stuff is just really well refined, I would say. That it's brings a lot of like Peach's personality to the forefront. Audio wise, like it all kind of matched. I don't know that there was anything that really like screamed out to me, but I don't think it was bad either. I thought it was just kind of met the theme of each level, so that's totally cool too. Cowgirl Peach in some of the other sections, there might have been another character type too, where even the gameplay element within those levels kind of switched up, where towards the end it went into kind of like an auto scroller, sort of almost like a runner type of thing going on, that you had to complete. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, and you're trying to collect maybe like 8 to 10 stars or coins or whatever per level that might be a little hidden, or you have to get in specific ways. And in some of those auto scroller sections, it was like not necessarily the easiest to like grab all of them, at least in your first chance at it, so it's like, okay, yeah, there's a little bit of challenge here too if you're trying to 100% these levels, but it's mostly I think aimed at more early players, but it's also not so simple that it's not engaging for everyone. It's a fun thing, and it's got a great presentation value. I'm happy to have it for sure.
Yeah, I definitely remember thinking that when I played the demo. Like, this game looks good and just feels good.
Yeah,
no pun intended. It's cool to see them branching out from because I feel like Kirby's Epic Yarn, Yoshi's Woolly World, and Crafted World all are kind of cut from the same cloth. Again, definitely. No pun intended there.
Which are tremendous
either, but
nailing these puns. Yeah,
I know, just walking right into them.
But those are phenomenal games. But
it's some of my favorites. Yeah, but it's cool to see them not doing just a 2D platformer. Even though there's at least the bits I play were mostly 2D-ish, but the sword fighting was kind of like a beat 'em up. You know, like a 2D 2.5D beat 'em up.
Definitely, yes, which felt right at home. Especially with a lot of what I've been playing in the last few years.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess I'll take the reins here and just talk a little bit about another game that I've been playing lately. If you're good to wrap up the Princess Peach talk there.
Yep.
I picked up a game on sale because I'm just doing what I've always been doing as of late. Just going through the Switch eShop. Came across another game that I was not even aware of until recently because it was on sale, and it's called Alba, a Wildlife Adventure. And this is from the developers, the studio's called Us 2. And they made Monument Valley, which I actually hadn't realized. That's actually what made me put me over the top, because it had gone on sale a few times recently where I was like, it's I don't know, it's normally $20. I think I picked it up for $8 or something like that. And I don't know if I can't remember what it was on sale for recently, but I just, for whatever reason, I was like, I don't need to buy this right now. I got a million other games that I haven't played yet. But then when I saw from the studio that made Monument Valley, I was like, that was that game on iPhone in the early days, right? Now that with the isometric perspective and the puzzle game, it always reminded me a little bit of Echo Chrome, if anybody remembers that game on the PS3. But those Monument Valley 1 and 2 were supposed to be really great games. And it actually really bums me. They made a widescreen version of it that came out, I think, only on Steam or PC so far. It hasn't been released on consoles, best that I can tell.
Okay.
I'm hoping it gets ported eventually, because I have always really wanted to play those Monument Valley games. But nonetheless, this Alba, a Wildlife Adventure, kind of veers from the stuff they'd done in the past, although it looks like they've done games of all different varieties. I actually stumbled across that game that I sent in the Discord too, that Desta game that they made after this Alba game, which looks like some kind of turn-based, pinball, kickball, strategy. I don't know if it's a roguelike or whatever, but That game just looked amazing. So I was like, okay, I gotta look more into this studio here. But again, back to Alba before I get too sidetracked here. This game is kind of like it was actually the way I was looking at the Steam page and watching the trailer to just kind of refresh my memory. They called it a chill-ectathon, and I was like, that's kind of like a perfect way to put it, because it's kind of like a 3D platformer, except I don't think you can jump. You're just kind of like running around and talking to people and completing various tasks, and kind of like a little Gator game. It has like a similar kind of energy to that. Obviously not like as silly, and you're not talking to anthropomorphic characters or whatever. You play as this girl. I think it's like got like a Spanish theme to it, if I'm not mistaken.
Cool.
And you're on this like little Mediterranean island. And basically like there's all this like wildlife and your family. It starts out, you're like with your grandparents, and you take this picture, and there's this lynx in the background of the picture. And then it like goes 10 years later, and you're a little more grown up, and you're like, oh, the lynx are extinct now. And you're kind of like, your family's like a little depressed about like how things of the wildlife has changed, and what they just make a few comments about that. Kind of a typical, opening to this kind of game.
Sure.
But then like the mayor, announces, okay, we're going to close down the wildlife reserve because it's, it's clearly beyond repair, and we're building this huge hotel. We got to bring the tourists back in. We got to bring this island back to life. And, now your task is like, no, we need to bring the wildlife reserve, back up to repair. So like you got this phone that you're going around and taking pictures of all that wildlife around the animal or around the island. Kind of like Pokemon Snap style, essentially. Although it gets a little tricky. Like, I mean, there are some where, like, for example, the very first picture you get to take, other than of your like grandparents, that kind of is like in the story or whatever. But like, and this is kind of too, you like repair this birdhouse or whatever with your grandpa just by like clicking A on it or whatever. But then it gets repaired, and then immediately these birds come and land on it, and then they're just sitting there waiting for you to take their picture.
Nice.
But then there's tons of other animals that are, they're just going about doing their thing. If you get you're getting ready to take a picture of this bird, and it just flies off and whatever, or you get too close to it and scare it off or whatever it might be. But I'm just really loving, like, it's like it takes itself seriously, but not too seriously. Like one of the first like two animals you rescue, like the very first one you see, you meet this like friend of yours. I can't remember if you're friends from before or if you just like quickly become friends. I can't fully remember. I think you're like, every year when you go on this vacation, you see them or something like that. And you're like running around, and you get to this cliffside, and you hear this like screeching, and you see there's like a beach, like dolphin on the beach, and you got to go round up 10 or 12 people and get them to come help you. And then they, you help throw the dolphin back into the ocean.
Nice.
But to get them to come help you is like literally just like go talk to 12 people in the town. And everyone's like, oh, I'd love to help. There's a dolphin in trouble. Like, I'll be there in an instant, So it's just like unbelievably charming. It's got a really great presentation value. It's kind of like not low poly, but kind of like it's detailed, but it's low poly ish.
I'm looking at it now. I like the visual style though.
It's like really clean, really like warm, all the colors and stuff. And then the music too it's kind of subtle, like when you're in between, like, because it kind of transitions like the chapters, if you will, or the levels. Like, it's kind of open world ish in the sense that you don't seem like you're on any kind of timer. You can just go do things, but then once you complete the set of tasks, or maybe just a certain number of tasks, because it seemed like I still had things I could still do, but it'll just like kind of end the day, and then it'll kind of like the camera will like pan up and say like, day number 3, and like have like a title for it, and like music will kind of kick in with this like real mellow, like islandy, not Jimmy Buffett islandy, but like, so I guess Spanish islandy, I don't know, kind of music. And I just really love it, where otherwise it's just kind of, you're hearing more of like the nature, wildlife sounds. And then like you're taking the pictures that you get of all the different animals, because you're taking them with your phone. And then if they're in frame and good enough in frame, I haven't taken any yet that were like far enough, but before I take the picture, it'll say like too small or something like that.
Nice.
So I don't know what happens if you don't get one good enough, but then nonetheless it scans them. Then it like will identify them, kind of add them to your journal of animals and whatnot. And then any animal that you have a picture of. So there's all these little like, like at the zoo or wherever, there'll be like a little, or even on like a hiking trail, there'll be like the little like placards that say like, oh, these are the animals you might see in this part of the park or this area. Nice. So then you can like replace those. And then as you repair those, it kind of fixes things up, or you can just pick up trash, or you can, I'm sure as you talk to people, you get more side quests and stuff like that. I've only played the first like 2 or 3 days of the game.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's so like relaxing and like it's just the perfect like game to play after like a day at work or something like that. Like not too much to think about, no real like gameplay. Although again, I will say like you gotta snipe some of these pictures, man. Like you really have to
love the picture taking in any game. Even if it's the main thing in Pokemon Snap or that's awesome. Or even if it's like a side thing like it is in some of the new Zelda games or other games like that. I love it. I'm always a sucker for that.
Yeah, it can be fun, or even just those where you can like go into the camera mode and like even that can be kind of fun. But I do really like when it can be a little more like incorporated into the gameplay, and like I really like even just the element of like it feels very tactile the way your character like holds the phone out in front of them and like takes a picture. Like it just feels like very real, very real to like now, like it.
Right.
You don't play a lot of games that feel like you're just playing in the current time period,
True.
I guess, if that makes sense. But like,
what are you playing?
It's just kind of cool. I'm playing on Switch actually. I picked it up on. Nice. I think I got it for like $8, or it might have even been like $6 on sale, but it's normally about 20. I'm obviously happy I scooped it up on sale, but again, with like the production value seems definitely fully worth that, price tag.
I wish listed it on Xbox, but I see it's on a whole bunch of other things. So sweet.
And it's just so charming. The dialogue's really well done. Like I just really like all the interactions with the character, you and all the characters. Like it's pretty funny. I'm not busting out laughing or anything, but I got a few good like little chuckles while I was playing the first couple sittings. And another one that like I don't know how quickly I'm gonna run and fire up the next session. Like the Haunties definitely has my like attention.
Sure.
Where this game's like, again though, like sometimes like I don't want to play a game where I have to like think and solve puzzles and get into bullet hell situations. Like sometimes I just want to play a game where I just go around and take pictures of birds and
sink into the couch a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. There's like a squirrel that was poisoned, and I had to go like find the vet and then go like feed it some medicine, and then I just get a good picture of it after that. Like it's That's just amazing. I don't know. I really love and again, just the charm, I guess, of the presentation all across the board is just really solid. So glad that I guess I kind of it just goes to show that like I really think it's worth it on whatever platform you're on, just scrolling through the games on sale sometimes, even if it's a little tedious to like, because I will say on the Switch it's a pain in the ass to like wait for the games to load and scroll down when there's thousands of games on sale. But
the
nonetheless,
eShop itself is creaky these days.
I know. I know. And it's like, but I wouldn't have even known this game existed if I didn't see it on sale and go, oh, what is this? This looks kind of cool. And then, come to find out they have, it's a developer of a pretty prominent studio, or a, studio that's put out some pretty, well-known games throughout their time. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, really having some fun with this one.
Oh, man.
But yeah, why don't I kick it back over to you to wrap things up for tonight?
Yeah, we got to have something retro on here. So we're now going to talk about the Disney Classic Games Collection, which I've owned I've owned the collection 2 different times, let alone some of these games on here. I also have owned in other forms. So this came out originally, Digital Eclipse was developer publisher, although the development goes back, certainly if you're talking about the core games in here. So this version, the Disney Classic Games Collection, is the updated version. The original version just had the different 16-bit iterations of Aladdin and Lion King. And then they put out, that was 2019, and in 2021 they put out an updated version, the Disney Classic Games Collection, with Aladdin, the Lion King, and Jungle Book. And so it was only the 16. I thought there were like some Game Boy games. I thought so too.
Or no.
When I was looking through the menus, like maybe that's unlocked. But at least from the get go, it's kind of the 16-bit stuff on those.
Yeah, maybe I'm mixing it up with that Cowabunga collection, that Turtles collection that had like all the Game Boy, the NES, and all that stuff.
That is what I thought too, though. Like I thought that it was like had some of that stuff in it, so maybe those things are unlockables, because I thought that was part of what sold me on the original version when I had bought that as well.
Yeah, I kind of thought that too.
Game Gear versions of these games or whatever, right?
Yeah, but you do, we're talking about different versions, not to sidetrack us before we even get started, but you do get the Genesis and the Super Nintendo version of Aladdin, correct?
Yes.
Maybe that's what I'm even thinking of. I just remember there being some selling point of like, oh, that's cool that they give you all of that.
Yes, you have. So on this Disney Classic Games collection, the updated version that had Jungle Book on it, you also are getting, like you said, Kevin, you get the Genesis and Super Nintendo versions of Aladdin, which are completely different games in the first place. The Super Nintendo version being developed by Capcom and is more of a straightforward platformer versus the Genesis version being kind of more of like the cinematic platformer style of the 90s and 80s, you know, closer akin to, not quite, but closer akin to something like Prince of Persia or even like Earthworm Jim.
Yeah, it's got more of that in its DNA for sure. Yeah. The levels are a little more like open-ended-ish and stuff.
Yeah. And you kind of have to play a little bit more to figure out maybe what's a grabbable, cliffside and things of that nature. And then once you know it, but there's a little bit of that learning curve more than there is on the Super Nintendo version. But I grew up with the Genesis and the Genesis version of Aladdin and the Genesis version of The Lion King, and actually the NES version of Jungle Book, which was one of the last like new official released NES games that I got.
I forgot that they even made that for NES.
Yeah. And that NES version wasn't too bad. I can't say it was like my favorite game, the Jungle Book on NES, but it was fine.
That was one of the few non-Capcom NES ones, right? Wasn't that like Virgin Interactive or something? Yeah.
Yes, which is the case with the Aladdin on Genesis as well, and Lion King, the Virgin Interactive.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah. So, although I think Disney themselves had kind of a stronger hand in these Genesis versions, especially Aladdin and the Lion King, for the graphics and those sort of things as well. But besides getting those two different versions of Aladdin, there's also a final cut version of Genesis Aladdin that's on this collection that it has some bug fixes and apparently some cut material. I will say I played it. I didn't play through it.
Yeah. These games are tough.
Oh my God, they're brutally difficult. They're kind of broken, actually.
Yeah, especially Lion King, from what I remember. But actually Aladdin too. I played mostly actually the Super Nintendo one growing up. One of my good friends had it, and I just remember like we would get to this one stage in the clouds, which is I think a later stage in the game. Yeah. But I just remember there being like these floating pots and genie pots everywhere.
Oh, of course.
It was like, this is insane. Like it was so hard. The magic carpet levels, so hard.
Those versions of those levels in the Genesis version are also impossible. The genie's lamp and the magic carpet ride are just ridiculously difficult levels that you basically have to memorize to be successful at.
Yep.
Just trial and error. But it was the rental era, so that's what they did on purpose. But yeah, this final cut apparently adds things. What I'll say, that probably the most interesting thing about this collection to me at this point, and for the sake of what my daughter likes to do in watching games, is that all of these games come with the ability for them to play themselves. Like you can start it, including the Final Cut version that they released for this.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So like that's what we did is I forgot about that. That like when I bought this, I hadn't opened it yet, of course, until just last weekend. And then I'm like, oh, okay. Like you want to watch, like you're interested in Daddy's version of, Aladdin and whatever, like, shoot, the other, analog systems are on this other thing and I don't have the set up completely. I've got the Switch collection. Let me open that up, get it out of its cellophane wrapper and see what's going on here. And I'm like, oh shoot, that's right. They'll play itself. And not only will it play itself, but not like a video. It's literally the game, like the emulator playing the game, and you can jump in at any point.
Oh, that's so cool.
And take over. So you can say, fuck that second level of The Lion King with the stupid giraffes and the hippos. It's impossible. It's broken garbage. I don't need to play that. It's ridiculous that that's the second level. It's awful. It looks cool. Visually, it's amazing. The play of it is terrible.
It's honestly, everything is fine other than the grabbing the tails, the swinging rhino tails.
Yes.
And the corner of those fucking hippo cheeks, like the hippo heads. That's the only, and like obviously it's bullshit like figuring out, okay, I gotta bark or not bark but roar at these monkeys and get them to like go in the right direction. But that's at least that's normal retro gaming, like trial and error. But those, I can't tell you how many times like, oh, finally I nailed that part, and then you go to try to grab that hippo's ear and you just splash right in the water. Oh, game over.
What caused me to just say like, no, I'm done. Again, this time, which has been the case historically with the Genesis version on Genesis, was like there's a part near the end of that second level where you're riding an ostrich and you're like jumping to grab the MacGuffin collectible, and like the third jump is like jump over this tree branch, but it's also arbitrary and you can't literally even see where you're supposed to jump. You just like it's just the screen like overlay telling you jump, and then like. But then every single time I would hit the branch, like no matter what, like no, I'm done with this. I can't.
That part is frustrating. I do remember that too. Because it like it gives you like a little hint sometimes, but then it starts just showing like a question mark and like again, you just got to memorize it.
Yes, and I even think you can like it's got the rewind whatever like emulator features, let alone that it could play itself. So you can get around that stuff easy enough, but just the playing of it is just the frustration just mounts so quickly in the modern context. So it's just like I still am, find myself preferring the Genesis Aladdin. I know nostalgia is a huge part of that, and just like the Disney visuals and like that soundtrack, that version of those songs is just like imprinted in the back of my brain type of thing. It's just like that's just it for me for Aladdin. But I'm not saying these games don't have warts. That's for sure.
And Lion King too. That was one that like looking back to like visually amazing. Gameplay's not bad, but it's just not bad. It just doesn't hold up that good. It's the hitboxes are too janky. Like it's just too, and it's just too hard.
Yeah, it was way too hard and felt like maybe a little bit more rushed than either of the Aladdin versions were, I think. And just like, which sucks because like that's when I originally got a Sega Genesis for myself, when I like won whatever like raffle thing at school in 3rd or 4th grade, I think. And like got 100 Jeffrey bucks and got myself a Genesis 2 that came with the Lion King. That's like That's what I did because I think maybe one of my cousins or a friend had it, and I was like, oh my god, I have to. And I was like, oh shoot, maybe I should have got that Sonic multi-card collection instead.
The only reason I ever got to see more of the Lion King game as a kid was on the Super Nintendo version. If you typed in Barry, I'm assuming for Barry Sanders as
nice.
Like, the code on like I think on the sound test or on the options screen or something. It would take you to a menu where you could just literally pick any level in the game and start from there. So I got to like see, like I would always like just type it in and then start at the Scar battle right off the bat. But like, that game is just brutal. Even that first like hyena battle, it's like this is just brutal. You can so easily lose so much life right there.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I just It was cool to like, this is what the Super Nintendo version of this, like in that case, they were the same game. Like, what's the difference is like, the Super Nintendo version has much clearer like sound, like samples, better audio samples than the Genesis one. Sounds a little grungy, but it still, gets the job done. Although then like the Super Nintendo one looked a little zoomed in, which was like, oh yeah, that's right. I guess they don't have the same resolution, and they probably, because it's Virgin Interactive and this came out afterward, they probably developed it first on Genesis and then ported effectively in that case,
Yeah, but cool
and then updated the sound samples.
And cool that they would go the extra mile, because I feel like they could have easily just been like, hey, we're going to pick one of these and like let you switch the soundtrack and maybe just have like the 2 versions of Aladdin, because those are like actually different, Right. Where I feel like that's kind of cool, where I don't know if it's the same for Jungle Book, where it's just like copy and paste, basically the same game.
Yeah.
But it's cool that they like give you that like kind of historical side of it. Like, hey, you can see how both versions felt.
Agree. Especially in the, just to see what's the difference is, how does it feel? Which one do I prefer? Or even, in the case, if you got it on Switch, you could literally buy the retro controller that matches your experience, if you wanted to.
See if that Barry code still works.
It probably does. And then, I did launch Jungle Book 2 because I was just like curious. I'm like, I have the NES game, and I played that quite a bit because it was one of the handful of games that was accessible to me all the time as a kid. I wonder which one did I launch? I think I still launched the Genesis version. Just wanted to see what that was all about. But it was basically like what I remembered the NES game to be. Granted, I don't know that I've even turned that game on in the last, oh my God, 20 years probably. But it was like, okay, yep, that kind of reminds me of the first level. You're collecting bananas, and there's lots of verticality with vines and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and,
that's what I remember, and I think I played the Genesis one. Yeah,
there's like weird, what's it called? Like a seesaw action going on where you jump on one side and you get slinged in the air, but then you're going to get hit by random shit because it's the same Virgin Interactive sort of gameplay design that way. And it's just, it might even be more busy than either one of those other games were.
It felt the most messy from what I remember. Yeah, the other ones at least felt like they kind of had some level design to them.
Kind of weird that Jungle Book of all things was like pushed then. I think they must have like re-released the movie during that era.
Yeah, or on VHS or something. Yeah. Because sometimes it's random. Like, why did they pull this random old movie out of the woodworks and make a game out of it?
Yeah. Sometimes it's okay, but I'm like, that one is just, it's fine. I'm glad it's there. Hey, that's cool.
I was going to say, oddly enough, that's like the one that compels me the most to get the collection, because I'm like, that's the one that I've like really not played all that much. I think me and my cousin, when my brother got like a retro Genesis later, when we grew up, he had like no games, so we bought him like one of those eBay lots, and that was like one of the few games that caught my eyes. Like in my head, retro Disney game, plug it in and see if it's any good.
Totally.
Obviously, it doesn't have that Capcom lineage, but not not. There's good Disney games not made by Capcom, so
totally. And I would argue that the best Capcom developed games were 8-bit games, not necessarily 16-bit ones.
I agree. Although Goof Troop.
Oh, shoot. Good point. Yeah, Goof Troop's great.
But I'll say like they definitely have like way more, like the library is much deeper on the NES.
Yes. And of that platform design is, I think that they nailed it on practically all of those games on the NES.
They really did, yeah.
Yeah, versus, although Goof Troop is so good, but it's not a platformer. It's got that top-down puzzle action.
Yeah.
Two-player.
Yeah, you don't see much of that from Capcom at all.
No. Although it is fun. I was just thinking about that like relatively recently. Like how cool is it that like Capcom is like more successful than they ever have been, and yet they've been around since those days. With this huge library of successful games across a lot of genres. Just happy to see them around still.
Yeah, still keeping it going, still putting out like an interesting game from time to time, making some, like, I know you were big on those Resident Evil remakes. So
God.
But like not just cash grab remakes, like they're like remaking those games like from the ground up. Some of them not quite as much. Like it seemed like Resident Evil 4 was more of like a remake beat for beat kind of thing, but like 1, 2, and 3 were like remade experiences. Reimagining. Yeah,
even 4 was a decent amount of reimagining. Just they used a lot of the source material because it was so damn good. But
you didn't need to
it was a bit of both.
But
I would say that 4 original is still enough of its own unique experience to play even after you played the remake. For what that's worth.
Well, especially when you compare him to Konami, who was like, in the NES era, that was like Capcom Konami as far as like third party stuff went, and to see where they're both at now, it's like night and day. So
that's a pretty good juxtaposition there, unfortunately.
Yeah,
it didn't have to be that way either.
See the dark side too. Yeah. Although Konami still will occasionally be like, I'm surprised they're putting this out. Okay, but
I know
who knows how good the port's going to be or whatever, because they're not known for putting out the best stuff these days.
Right. How involved are they even, or are they just
selling the name or whatever?
Saying here's the IP if you want to do something. Yeah. Like
who knows?
Boo.
Who knows?
Konami was so sweet back in the NES and Super Nintendo / Genesis days, to be fair.
They had a good run.
Incredible. Yeah. Capcom's still kicking it, though. Thank goodness.
Yeah. Holding down the fort.
Yeah. I think that's all I got to say about that collection now. Glad to own it, especially for playing itself. Like, that makes those games so much more accessible.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can start that at any time. Like if you're in the middle of a game, you can say, I want to take over from here, and then I'll pick it back up.
Good question. I'm not sure on that. That's a good question. It wouldn't surprise me if you could.
I bet you can.
I would assume so.
Yeah. But nonetheless, that is a cool feature.
I probably should have tried when I got frustrated there. Just in that Lion King ride.
Like, hey, beat this section for me.
Yeah.
Pick it back up. Yeah.
You mess with these stupid.
You do the Stampede level, and then I'll take it from here.
Which, again, like, cool that, like, they changed the perspective on that Stampede
Yeah, amazing
level, right?
visuals.
Yeah, unbelievable visuals. Like, and again, same studios with, like, the Disney Interactive / Virgin Interactive. It reminds me of, like, some of the Mickey Mania stuff that they were doing, right? Like, between that with the perspective change and what they could do with the sprite work and just how it looks so rich and, compared positively to movies that were hand drawn when they're on these 16-bit consoles is just a very impressive thing to pull off. But the gameplay can be a little rough.
Leave a little to be desired. Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
But yeah, I think we've gabbed on for long enough here this week.
Yes.
Yeah, we can wrap up the video games chit chat there this week. But I'm glad you brought up Princess Peach Showtime again too, because that's one that, like, unless I see it for cheap at the store, it'll kind of was off my radar. So now it's kind of back on my top of mind. Like, okay, I got to be on the lookout for that one for
it's such a genuine $40.
I'll probably snag that.
Yeah, it's nice. It's just a cool thing that it exists.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I guess we can leave it there for this week. And as always, you can find us on the internet at pursuingpixels.com and pretty much everywhere else. And until next week, we'll catch you then, and take care.
Bye-bye. I will find that Ninja Jaja Maru collection.
Let me know if you fire it back up again, because I'll happily jump back in. I played a lot of it, but I'll happily jump back in because I really love that game.
Nice. Yeah, I will look for it. I'm going to look for it before I forget. And
I'd be curious to see what you and Tina thought of it.
It does look like my BS, that type of, like, arcade action,
and it's like just screen. So frantic, and like, the way they embrace the franticness in this version is so good.
I love it.
It's so good.
And I've been more into playing with, like, arcade sticks, and this would seemingly lend itself.
It'd be great for that. Yeah,
nice. Heck into it. I should probably stop this recording.
Literally, you took the words right out of my mouth.
It's a dangerous game here.